All right, so let's continue our discussion. Okay, so in the first half of today, so we look at fiscal policy. Right, we have looked at expansionary versus contractionary fiscal policy, and we understand how fiscal policy can affect the economy, and particularly when the economy is in a expansion or in a recession, or typically in a fluctuation. Right. So, and then the last things we have discussed in the first half of today's class is three critiques regarding to expansionary fiscal policy. Okay, so I have explained to you so why they have those three critiques and why those three critiques may not be correct. Okay, so now we move to the next slide. So regarding to fiscal policy, there's a cautionary note. In the case of fiscal policy, there's important reason for cautions. There are significant lags. Or in other words, fiscal policy may respond slowly to economic fluctuation or may not be a timely measure when the economy is in trouble. Okay? Why is that? It is because in real economy, it takes time to do the following. Number one, it takes time to realize the recessionary or inflationary gap by collecting and analyzing economic data. Okay? So just imagine how we can measure in GDP or how we can measure in unemployment rate correctly. Right? So we spent 2 chapters to explain how to measure GDP and how to measure in labor market. Okay? So you can imagine that's a big or challenging task. Right? So particularly if we want to have a correct and accurate measure to those. Okay? It's going to take time. Right? And secondly, even though we realize the economy is in a recession, it's going to take time for us to develop a plan. Right? So we need to find, we need to design, or we need to sort out what kind of policy we should do. This is second. And the third, even though we have a plan, it's going to take time to implement action. And why? So first, probably we need to get approved by Congress, right? And then, so the money must be spent, but it's going to take time for the money to go to the household or go to the business, right? So because of these three reasons, so there are significant lags in using fiscal policy to help the economy. Okay, so this is something we need to be very cautious. Right? But of course, so that explains. So in reality, so we also has monetary policy, right? Because the monetary policy it may respond faster, but the monetary policy has its own limitation. So let's just wait for the next chapter to look at monetary policy. For now, let's just focus on fiscal policy. Right. So let's look at these practice questions. Contractionary fiscal policy. A is most helpful for restoring the economy to the potential output level when there is a recessionary gap. If there's a recessionary gap, meaning so we below our potential, right? And if we have a contraction of fiscal policy, that's going to push down the output further. So A is not correct. B, shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. Contraction of fiscal policy is going to shift the aggregate demand curve to the left, right? So this is not correct. C, often cause inflation or increase in aggregate price level. That's not true, right? Because contraction of fiscal policy push down or push the aggregate demand curve towards the left-hand side. D is if effective, shift aggregate demand to the left, resulting in a reduction in aggregate output and aggregate price level for a given short-run aggregate supply. So that's correct. So the contractionary fiscal policy is typically used when we have inflationary gap, right? So when the price is too high, when the output is beyond potential, right? So D is correct. Other one, which of the following is true, holding everything else constant? A, an economy can eliminate an inflationary gap by increasing government spending. So increasing government spending will increase aggregate demand and is the expansion of fiscal policy. So that is going to make the inflation even larger. Okay? So A is not correct. B, expansionary fiscal policy refers to an increase in tax. That's not true. So expansionary fiscal policy refers to a decrease in tax. C, when potential output is greater than actual aggregate output, the economy faces a recessionary gap. Okay. That is true, right? Because you produce less than your potential can produce. D, when short-run aggregate supply interact AD to the right of long-run aggregate supply, the economy faces a recessionary. That's not true. So if short-run aggregate supply interact with aggregate demand, so that gives us your actual GDP. Your actual GDP is on the right-hand side of long-run aggregate supply, meaning so you produce more than you potentially can produce. So meaning you are in an inflationary gap, right? So the answer is C. Okay. Now we can quickly look at the real economy. So in 2009, because of the financial crisis, the government decided to carry out expansionary fiscal policy. That was called American Recovery and Reinvestment Acts of 2009. So actually 2020, we have a similar act. So that was designed to help the economy due to the pandemic, right? So back in 2009, so you can see the total spending is close to 800 billion, right? Among these 800 billion, so there's a tax cut and there's a transfer, right? Transfer, and there's a government spending, right? And so similar this year, so we have a expansion of fiscal policy, but in terms of size, it's much, much bigger. Okay, so 2020, so this HERO Acts is the total size is more than 3 trillion. Okay, so about 4 times larger compared to 2009. Now, all right, so here, so this is visualization of CARES Act, this year's. Okay? So the total cost is 2.3 trillion. Right? And then, so this 2.3 trillion goes to where? So you have goes to households, it goes to business. Now you have a small business, right? And then you have healthcare provider. But where this money coming from? So you can see, so they are going to have tax break, so loans, right? So government provides loans, and then so you have unemployment benefit, right? So this is visualize. So what is the current stimulus plan look like? Okay. Now let's look at next topic, which is multiplier, right? So this multiplier idea was introduced by Keynes. So the multiplier says, so $1 spent into the economy will be magnified, okay, by marginal propensity to consume. Because if I spend $1, and this $1 becomes to second person's income, and then the second person is going to spend a fraction. And then, so the second person's spending will become a third person's income. And the third person is going to keep spending, and so on and so forth. Right? So you can see, so this $1 original spending will be magnified throughout this process. And then, so the net impact on the economy is going to be larger than the original $1 we spent. And so this is called multiplier. Right. So now we can look at the impact of government purchase of goods, right? Or in terms of multiplier effect. Right. So earlier, when we look at multiplier effect, we assume no taxes, no international trade. In that case, multiplier is given by this formula, right? And this actually is coming from the fact for any dollar amount we spend, and then say, for example, X dollars. And then this becomes to somebody else's income. So the somebody else is going to spend a fraction, X dollar times MPC, so on and so forth. And then we add all this spending together. So that's going to give you the multiplier. So that is what we have learned so far. Okay. Now, the multiplier effect may change with how we carry out the fiscal policy. Okay. So we are going to look at two types of policy, and their multiplier. Okay. So one is transfer and tax. Sorry. So one is transfer, the other is tax. So you're going to see, so their impact is going to be different. Okay. So let's say, for example, the government has $50 billion. So they have two options to help the economy. Either the 50 billion becomes tax cut, okay? Or this 50 billions becomes a transfer. Now we are going to see the other impact on the economy the same or not. Okay. Now we need to compare their differences. Okay. So in this table, we look at these two effects. There are two policies separately. Okay. Start with the first one. Okay. So in the first one, so essentially this is a government transfer. Oh, sorry, this is a government, right, so this government, this is a government spending. Okay. So if the government has a $50 billion rise in purchase of goods and services, and then immediately, so the aggregate expenditure increased by 50 billion. Now, on the other hand, if the government give away this 50 billion as transfer or as tax cut, so that means the households will have additional 50 billion to spend. That's income. But the household won't spend all of these 50 billion. How much will the household going to spend? The household is going to spend 50 times MPC. But here we say there's an MPC of 0.5. And then, so the household is going to spend 25 billions out of these 50 billions of transfer or tax cut, whatever. So now immediately you can see the difference in the first round. Okay? So let me emphasize. So if the government policy go through changes in their spendings, and then so this 50 billion will have 50 billions impact on the economy immediately. because the government spent 50 billion. On the other hand, if the government gives this 50 billion to households as transfer or as tax cut, okay, the cost to the government is the same, which is 50 billion. But this 50 billion becomes households' additional income. Households won't spend all of them. Households only spend a fraction of this 50 billion. Okay, and then so in the initial response, so the impact on the aggregate expenditure will be less than 50 billion. Now we go to the second round. In the second round, because in the first round, government spent 50 billion. This 50 billion becomes somebody else's income in the economy. And then whoever received 50 billions by providing goods and services to the government, so they were going to spend. They spend a fraction, which is equal to 25. On the other hand, so the household spent 25 out of 50 billion. And this 25 billion they spend becomes somebody else's income in the economy. And then so whoever received this 25 billions, they're going to spend a fraction, which is equal to 12.5. Now you can see the second round is smaller. And so on and so forth, we keep tracking all the spending. And toward the end, you can see the eventual effect of government purchase of goods and services will be 100 billion, compared with 50 billion if the government give households tax cut or provide additional transfer to the households. Okay, and the key difference is that so the government spending initiate a large first round spending compared with tax cut or transfer increase. Okay, so that's the difference. So here you can see the multiplier relies on the size of multiplier will relies on what type of policy the government will carry, right? Either is changes in government transfer or is a changes in tax. So they are going to have different net impact on our aggregate economy. Okay. So to follow the previous discussion, the size of the shift of the aggregate demand curve will depend on the type of fiscal policy. What that means is that, so if we are in a recessionary gap, okay, so you want move off the aggregate demand, right? And then so if we have an increase in government spending versus there's a decrease in tax, the net cost to the government is the same, but if this a government increase in government purchase of goods and service is going to have larger impact. If the tax cut, maybe it goes to here into the middle. Right? It just because this just follow the discussion we had in previous slides, right? So the multiplier will be different. Okay? And so we can summarize saying changes in government purchases have a more powerful effect on the economy than equal size change in taxes or transfer. Right. Also here, you may want to link to the earlier slides I showed you. Different administration, they have different preference regarding to what type of fiscal policy they want to use. Right? So you can see, and then so their choice or their decision will have different impact on our economy. Yeah. Okay, a few notes regarding to the discussion we had about the multiplier. In reality, it's more complicated than that. because so in our analysis, we use lump sum tax. What is lump sum tax? Lump sum tax says we pay a tax independent of our income, independent of our economic background. But in real economy, taxes typically depend on taxpayers' income. If that is the case, and then taxes will discourage or change your incentive to work, to invest. So in that sense, so this the multiplier of the tax will be even smaller, right? So this is just summarized by this sentence. If it's not a lump sum tax, the tax value will depend on the level of real GDP, and hence it will reduce the size of multiplier. Because if you change tax, right, so you're going to change incentive to work. So that's going to change the GDP. So this is on top of the multiplier. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for today. In the next class, we will pick up from these slides. All right. Thank you, and see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.